Started my first startup in '97. The world told me I was insane.
Our goal is creating future economies that are more regenerative and sustainable.
Something didn't match up. Why hasn't this become the next big thing? And that's where we invested.
The whole purpose of achieving anything in life is measurement.
I'm Kurt, the founder of Edifice, and we do have an absolutely fantastic star-studded panel here today to discuss data-driven operations in hospitality. And though it's titled Data-Driven Operations Hospitality, it's really relevant to all asset classes, office, multifamily, even internal operations, as the real estate industry as a whole really becomes more hospitality oriented and trying to find ways to add additional services, streamline operations, revenue streams, right? And this is goes to internal practices of how we validate our decision making, right? Challenge the ways that we've always done things. So if you're not in hotels and doing this is really relevant either way. And the panelists, I'll have them introduce themselves. They're not necessarily focused in hotels per se, but we're becoming more and more hospitality oriented as a whole. So I'll just let say Brad start it off and give an introduction, and then have everyone go around.
Yeah, so I'm Brad Kirshenbaum. I'm the Senior Director of Innovation at CA Ventures. We build quite a few things, but my primary focus is on student housing. We've got about 50 assets worldwide, primarily in the United States, but also in the UK and Central America. I do the vetting and sourcing of any new products, opportunities, services, you name it, that might come to the organization, and evaluate them. And then should we decide to move forward, do the project and implementation management of those things. So it's fun to explore, and happy to be a part of the panel.
Great, thanks. LD, why don't you go?
Sure. Hey, everyone. LD here, one of the founders of Cherre. We're a real estate data management analytics company, so focused on helping our clients, large asset managers, investors, brokerage firms, service providers around the industry, connect all their disparate data to a single source of truth and make it available to the entire organization for better investment, underwriting, and management decisions. We've been growing really fast. We've raised about $75 million so far, about 100 people based out of New York, and I'm excited to be on the panel today.
Nice, thanks. Chris, why don't you go next?
Sure. Yeah, I was been in the hotel business for 35 years, about 17 years running properties, and then about 17 years doing operational excellence work. So data-driven understanding of how our hotels work in both the U.S. and Asia and the Middle East. And I've done some consulting for about 7 years around the operational excellence piece as well. And so that's what's intrigued me about Edifice is that I think LD, you mentioned disparate data. We've always had this issue of being able to pull it together, understand it, and make use of it on a larger scale, and then also to understand it just in general and how to get to it. So I think this is partly why I'm involved with, trying to help Edifice get moving forward. It's and I also do organizational structure. So that's where I kind of focus on excellence and boards.
Thanks, Chris. Reid.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. My name is Reid Snyder. I head up partnerships and platform for HQO. We are a tenant experience platform. We're venture backed. We've raised around 107 million to date. And we are in about 150 million square feet worldwide, primarily in North America, but we have offices in London and in France as well, servicing those markets. And our core business is serving owners and operators of commercial office space to help facilitate great workplace experiences through technology and through services. So we have a product called the Digital Grid, which is our primary data use case, which we can talk about today.
Awesome, thanks. And Ken,
I'm excited to be here with the group.
Glad you made it. Good to see your face. Oh, you're on mute. The discussion here came really from the dichotomy between real estate company operations and other industries like finance or advertising, and how they've adopted and really are reliant on data and technology to support most of their decision making, right, as a company. And in real estate operations, we're usually tracking really simple numbers, like high level numbers, in order to get a feel about how a property is doing. A lease up, a vacancy, rent roll, RevPAR, all these type of things that take, I would say, real estate professionals a little bit longer to get a grasp of these high level metrics, to understand how they relate to one another of a specific property over long building life cycles. Like really kind of basic numbers. And it's much like how the internet was kind of tracking web pages 20 years ago, where in the lower left hand corner you'd see how many people landed on that web page that day. But since the past 20 years, the amount of data and analytics for web pages is just completely exploded, right? And understanding cohort analysis, doing A/B testing, using this massive amount of data to drive targeted ads and even influence a political election. Like, it's crazy what data and analytics have done for the web, which none of us thought possible right today. So as the pandemic has really been a driver for the real estate industry as a whole to adopt technology, how can new data sets or existing data sets refactored or analyzed change what we believe real estate as itself is capable of, right? Or what we thought was impossible is now possible as an industry to do during this time. So really, I'd just like we'll talk about the good, the bad, the ugly about data and real estate operations, and really like to open it up and talk about, maybe to say, Brad first, you're at CA Ventures, you guys are interested in data. Why are you or CA Ventures really taking a data or focusing on a data-centric approach versus, say, a traditional means of analyzing, developing, operating your assets?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially from the operations side, so much of the decision-making process has to do, or in the past has been, around anecdotal evidence. We think people are using this, and we see this, and we feel like this, but you can't really make any decisions based upon that. You can go off of market research, and you can look at all those different elements, but we see data as an opportunity to refine the way that we serve our residents, but then also the way that we could potentially build things in the future. And that's everything from how many people are passing through our main entrances to the building versus, maybe a side entrance. How many people are using our amenity spaces? What are they doing in those amenity spaces? And what do they want out of them? So instead of somebody coming in and saying, we see our study lounges are pretty busy, then if we have data around that, what we can actually do is we can take a look at it and we can say, nobody's using our study lounges. The only reason people think the study lounges are busy is because property managers only go up there during this specific time, or they're even busier than we think. We need to put more of an emphasis on it. But I think that to this point, without the emphasis on data, people are flying, not blind, but they're flying with low visibility. There's a nice fog in front of the cockpit window.
Yeah. And then, I mean, on that note, like, why has it changed really over the past 5-10 years that you guys are now interested, like more operators are interested in these metrics versus, previously 5-10 years ago in student housing or hospitality or multifamily, in your opinion?
I think the means to collect that information is much more prevalent. It wasn't nearly as easy to look at it. And the world has just become a more data-driven place. I mean, it's cliche to say, moneyballing things, but that's really where I think that the mainstream focus on using data and analytics to extrapolate information has come from. There's a lot of truth in numbers, and that's become more prevalent recently. But the ability to actually gather data, even if it's just via a survey, and you can survey an entire group of residents far easier than you could 10 years ago. That's huge. I think that everybody wanted this, and now there's finally means to communicate with your residents to passively get information or to actively get it.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. And LD too, you deal with massive amounts of data. You're not so specifically the operation, and there's a lot of getting data, cleaning it up, factoring it, and then making sense of it. Do you agree with Brad that it's becoming more easy, or is it just more data, more problems? It's kind of what's your take on that?
Yeah, we sit on, obviously ridiculous amounts of data, obviously operational data, financial data. Companies who work with Cherre typically connect both their internal data, obviously, and market data. I think that, data to me is it's almost like a misnomer, right? Because everything's data to a certain degree. The question is, what do we have without data? For Brad's point, which is anecdotal, I have a hunch, I have a feeling. I think in our industry, the professionals who have done well over the years have done well on typically two fronts. One is capital raising, and I think there's been a huge advantage in just people who could raise capital, right? And that advantage has been, going away. It's eroding, right? Because everybody can raise capital right now. The cost of capital has been really cheap over the last decade. And folks who really built their name by having access to more capital than everyone else don't really have those same advantages today. Although some people are still able to raise, outraise everyone else. But I think that kind of pushed everyone else to think about what is the advantage that we have as an organization. And those questions brought a lot of people up pretty empty, because a lot of time the answer was relationships. And those relationships that they thought were really unique to them during the pandemic, it became very obvious that those relationships are not unique. Everybody was going golfing, taking out every single major person. You all got the same deal. There's no such thing as an off-market deal. It sounds great to say it. It just doesn't exist in the real world. And are there partnerships between people that can come? Yeah, of course there are these rare opportunities, but that doesn't move the vast majority of the market. And for the vast majority of the market, which has a lot of capital right now, right? We're not talking about this post-recession period where nobody has money to invest. Major firms have a lot of money at their disposal. They understand that they can do things today that they couldn't do a few years ago. The tech stack is just very different. Things we can do today we just couldn't do a few years ago, 10 years ago for sure. And they want to use that opportunity right now to build some kind of competitive advantage, because they look at other industries and see what happened to those who kind of got left behind from these types of evolutionary processes. I think those who speak about Moneyball for real estate scare the hell out of me usually, right? Because 99% of the time, those who talk about it, you'd ask, okay, so what does your data look like today? I got some spreadsheets over here. I got, some platform. Okay, so all your data is in disarray across your entire organization. Not a single thing's connected, and we're talking about how you want to wave some magic wand and have Moneyball the next day. It usually tells me that there isn't that kind of, maturity within the organization to understand what it is. And then there's the rare ones who really do know what they're talking about. When they say Moneyball, they really mean it, because they do have the data operation behind it to support it. Those few are really exceptional, and that's why those firms are really outperforming their peers right now in everything, more or less.
Yeah, and Chris, you were kind of mentioning in the beginning too, your experience in hotels. Probably more data comes out of hotel asset classes than any other asset classes currently, which is changing. But trying to make sense of all this and get insight is something you've been doing your whole professional career. How does what LD said resonate with you?
Yeah, no, and I think both what LD said and then Brad as well, right? Most of it is broad swath market research. What are the other guys doing? That's pretty cool. Oh, this feels right. And in particular in the hotel world, now that everybody's focused on brand and really trying to define or separate themselves from and being distinct across each of the brands. Marriott's got 30 brands. How do you separate yourself, right? And so they still live by sort of old school, I think, lagging indicators. They look backwards to look forward. They look at other people to see what they might not have seen. And I think now the new data opportunities are what's really happening and what's really going on. And again, how is our space being utilized? Do people really care about that stuff? And we can capture it in the algorithms that are being devised now, for people to understand the data. And my biggest struggle was always the disparity in the data. There was this data, and now there were buckets of data all over the place. And each one was used to make a decision about something, but never as an aggregate to make decisions as a whole. And I think, now we've got capability to look at it differently, and also the use of technology to make sense of it for us, because otherwise it gets too complicated, which is a struggle I always had. People were like, oh my God, it's data. What am I going to do with it? I don't know what to do. I'm not a data guy. I'm not a math guy. I'm not a science guy. I'm not a physics guy. I just let it go. This is what it says, right? And now, with the help of technology, I think we can actually make sense of it, tell stories that are simple for people to understand, and make better decisions as an aggregate or whole, looking at the current and or moving forward.
Yeah. And now that Ken's joined, I would say, Ken, give a quick intro on yourself. And I know you got a lot to say about what Chris just mentioned.
I'm glad everyone can hear me. I mean, I had to call my team, be like, "What's going on with this thing right now?" So, so I'm actually CEO, founder, chairman of EV Hotel Group, EV Hotel, EV Human. I mean, it just goes on and on. But been in the industry 25 years. Graduated from Emirates Academy in Dubai with my MBA, International Hospitality. Did my internships at the Burj there. And what I've seen with this industry, even for the last 10 years, is we've been so stagnant with innovations. We've been so stagnant with technology. So I've kind of released a revolution in the hospitality industry. That's, that's what I would call. I mean, obviously our first EV hotel is going up in downtown Phoenix in 2022. And it's all about technology, innovations, automation. There's no front desk there. We have over 25 smart devices in each guest room, controlled by our EV Human software. That's the world's first all-in-one software. It acts as a PMS, contactless, and back office. So it's all about data, like everyone's saying. I think just the industry hasn't taken kindly to it. And that is what we're introducing, is how do we now take away, just as Chris was saying, there's data here, data there. That's what we call data islands, where the data just sits there and doesn't transmit to anything else. So now we're taking that physical data and we're going to utilize that certain data, and there's a lot of processes that are kind of broken. And I think I spoke to you, Kurt, a while ago about this. Is one thing the hotel looks at as a breakfast hostess. She comes in the morning and she says, how many rooms, right? How are we going to tell how many people you need to serve breakfast to by saying how many rooms? So we have to take a physical count and use the analytical tools to get that physical count. And that's what we're doing. We're obviously doing all of these things that are very different from the brands. I'm not going to say which brand, but one brand approached me about bringing our brand into their brand. And I said, absolutely not. That's not happening. Well, I think they're just so behind in innovation and they can't roll it out. It's when you have, as Chris was saying, and you have over 30 brands, you have over, thousands and thousands of hotels that you try to say, put a smart thermostat in. They can't tell them to make that sort of investment. So it takes them an 18-month rollout to even get that sort of investment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of interesting. Like, well, why do you think, I guess, historically, anyone, why is it just slow to adopt? If data is the oil, if it's going to change the industry, right? Why aren't people jumping on this and making that investment right now and expediting something that 18th month for a thermostat versus, we need to hire on a data scientist. We need to have more data analysts looking at all our properties and trying to understand where we can add additional value here and there. Why isn't that occurring faster?
I would probably tell you, and I'll give you an example. And let's take, for instance, Hilton. Okay. If you reach out to Hilton today and ask them, can I speak to somebody in your new technology department? And they'll tell you, we don't have a department that handles new technology. We leave it up to the hotelier. How can you leave that sort of decision up to the hotelier when you're supposed to act as a brand? And I've worked with all these people. I mean, I talk to Kristen Seta almost every week, every 10 days, right? And I tell them, the reasoning on what we need to do here. And the same thing with Jim Alderman, the CEO of Radisson. And I think what has happened here is they've been so behind and they haven't kind of nipped at it every year. And now they're just extremely behind. They're probably 10, 15 years behind. The airline industry 3 years ago did the mobile check-in, right? 24 hours prior check-in. And we still don't have that cornered with every single brand in this industry. And they don't put it in their budget. They feel that they want to operate the same way. And they don't put it at the forefront that we need to do it this way. Hilton just most recently is changing their PMS system, their on-queue PMS system. They got a pilot at 30 hotels for a hotel key. The new PMS system is cloud-based, right? it took them this long to realize we need to go to a cloud-based PMS. Marriott still operates Fosse that probably you and I and everybody else understands what a DOS system looks like. That's what Fosse is, okay? And they operate that still. So this is how behind we are, you know?
I mean, Reid too, like you mentioned the digital grid, kind of similar to like Cherre is like bringing all these disparate amounts of data together, right? To get a new insight that a human with spreadsheets or otherwise with siloed or not siloed data couldn't do otherwise. Is the kind of what Ken was mentioning, is it like the industry is just so far behind, they just can't create or won't invest in this, and they're relying on other technology providers like HQO or Cherre to like figure this out for them, and that's why they pay the service for build versus buy or pay for?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a lot of macro things in commercial real estate. I think one, just thematically, I think we'd probably all agree, real estate is not historically on the bleeding edge of technology. There's kind of a wait and see, let's make sure this fits our business model type approach to it. And their financial services brethren, so to speak, are only kind of like 5 years ahead in terms of the fintech boom and things like that. So I think we all probably would agree, it feels like the industry's behind. It's just in the early innings and the transition's starting to happen, and every major industry has had this transition into cloud and so on and so forth that's happening now. I think part of it's having like the right inputs. So, we're kind of the first decade into having everyone with smartphone technology. So for what we do at HQO, enabling different experiences and things through typically mobile applications, that is a relatively new input that we're able to actually glean real tangible engagement from, and create value versus create distractions. And so if you look at the emergence of prop tech pretty holistically, so many of the point solutions are mobile enabled. And so that evolution kind of being in maybe the second wave of that and actually having real value coming out of those applications, that's part of the input to data. Having sophisticated sensor technology like Edifice and things like that, like that is all relatively new and cutting edge. So being able to have the proper inputs, I think, is part of why we're just getting going here. And then I think, some of the stuff Ken was talking about, it's a competency and an awareness within the commercial real estate firms and that hasn't existed previously. So, the IT proposition historically has been on-prem technologies, making sure the building is secure, making sure that the HVAC systems and things like that fit in the business model and are efficient and so on and so forth. But it hasn't really been focused on the end customer. And I think, we're in almost entirely in commercial office. We have some mixed use that's primarily retail. But I think we'd all agree, I'd echo what Brad said in terms of the student housing, like being able to think about it from the customer perspective, our customer's customer. So the tenant, the student, whoever the user is of a property, that has been a fundamental change too, because I think, and even if you look at, WeWork and some of the others, despite the many problems in that industry, like actually changing the paradigm of, I can't just give you a black box and expect you to pay rent. I need to provide some level of service, utility, and so on and so forth. Like that value proposition as a fundamental shift has changed the need, and has enabled us to even set up these kind of data streams and data workflows.
Mm-hmm. Just a comment on housing, and not to plug HQO necessarily, but I'm a fan. I think that there's an expectation today, to your point, Reid, from office tenants, not the landlords necessarily, but from office tenants, that they want to interact differently with the environment they're paying for, right? And they're expecting a more hospitality-like experience, right? I'm expecting to walk into a building, get a hug, and good morning, Mr. Snyder, here's the coffee you prefer, the specific type that you like, and here's the pillow that you like, right? And we walk into an office every day, and it's like that same revolving door, and nobody gives a shit about you, right? And it's a weird dichotomy because you spend the vast majority of your day in that office, and as tenants, we spend ridiculous amount of money to make our employees happy, and all of a sudden we forget some basic things that actually really drive the thing, right? I want to know when my my subway is going to arrive, right? I want to be able to have delivery food. I want to have is my desk available, right? I know these things sound simplistic, but in the real world these things actually move the needle for my employees, and you want to keep them happy. I think there's going to be an expectation from all tenants, especially coming back after the pandemic, when we ask ourselves as employers, what is it that we need to provide our employees to make them happy and productive in an office? and throwing them into a box is clearly not the answer, and not being able to measure productivity is clearly not the answer, and not being able to test what works and what doesn't work is clearly not the answer. And I think the question just then becomes is, do I build this type of environment, which I think is a really horrible idea, because as Reid can probably share, it takes a lot of time to figure out which things work and which don't. And some people decide that that's not the case, more power to them, or just buy, right? And then the question is, what asset classes are you in and what meets? And to your question earlier, Kurt, I think the question around adoption has always been, where does this fit on the budget? I think that's been the biggest challenge for a lot of these solutions. But I push it down to the operational companies, right down to the building itself. Is that where the budget goes? Is it at the opco level? Is it at the fund level? And I think once we figure that out, and once we figure out these next budget cycles, we figure out where those things sit. Now that we know how much value and how much ROI these solutions add, I think we're going to see even faster adoption. But I think we need to get over that first hump of who's paying for this. Let's make sure it adds the value we believe that it adds. Then now that we know, let's make sure that we figure out a model that works for the rest of the industry.
Yeah, the budgeting and the value add thing is a really interesting component in what we're doing. I would echo what all of you have said. To go back to your hug statement for a moment, LD, I have actually tried to envision our buildings as when you walk in, you feel like you are getting a hug from the building. It's acknowledging your presence, and there's a comfort level to it. And
do you
I think
give the actual hug, Brad? Do you walk?
No, legally, I'm not allowed to do that, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
But I do think that there is something that resonates with me, even though we're not in a commercial space. When we come back from leaving our work from home environments where we're as comfortable as humanly possible when you really think about it, and then you go into an office where it's sort of a generic broad brush that is being painted to try to get you to fit into that particular environment. People are gonna want some personalization, whether it's in their where they live, if it's a home away from home like student housing, or if it's the office where they're spending some portion of their week. So I think that piece is going to matter. And it comes into, the first stage of everything that we do when we look at new products, and whether it's data-driven or just services-driven, is we look at it from an empathetic perspective and try to put ourselves in the shoes of the user and how it's going to affect them, and whether that user is property teams or a resident. It doesn't matter one way or the other. And to your point about budgeting, I got a little sidetracked there, but to your point about budgeting, the question I always get asked when I want to add something is, well, how much more can we charge in rent if we add that? And the answer is usually nothing, because you can add an amenity fee, or you can do things like that for a little while. But after 2 or 3 years, if you're the ones who are on the cutting edge, which we like to think we are, that are pushing the envelope, then what you do now is going to be table stakes in 3 years, and everybody's going to be doing it. And now you're not going to be able to charge more in rent. So don't budget for that, because it's not going to be, if you have smart lights and smart blinds and blah, 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 suddenly you can charge $50 a month more in rent. That's not it. It's just a differentiator from a marketing and experience perspective.
Yeah, I was thinking it's kind of like the Thekawasaki Curve, right? Like at first it's a wow, then it's expected, right? So suddenly there's no value added anymore because you keep raising the bar. Every time you raise the bar, you got to raise the bar again, right? And I think, speaking to everything that has been said, from my experience, the industry, or at least the hotel, hospitality, restaurant industry, struggles with human touch, which is, I think, Brad, you were kind of speaking to around, it's gummy bears or brownies because you can't hug them. But it's something that says, hey, you're recognized, you're needed, you're wanted, you're appreciated, you're valued, we feel good, thank you for being here, sort of thing. And then how do you do that with technology in order to not lose the essence of, what people still want to feel, right? Because there's still always going to be, in the hospitality world anyway, that component of expectation around feeling important, right? Because I'm paying you rent, and I'm here, and I'm living, and I'm the guy. I'm the only person in the building, right? I think we've been afraid of real data because we really don't know what to do with it. We've been, I think, Kurt, back to your point, hesitant to hire people who actually understand and can use the data to make sense of it for us, because God, that's a budget thing and a headcount thing, and it costs money. And geez, who needs data? We're hospitality guys, right? We're supposed to hug and kiss, not look at numbers and go, oh, geez, wow, look at that. It's a cool chart, right? But it doesn't mean anything, right? So, and then I think the other piece of it is for you guys, for the larger industry, where do you invest? Because everybody's coming at us in pockets, right? It's like, I can do this and I can do that. But is there a collective way for for somebody to put the picture together and say, these will get you where you want to be. This bucket of, or this bucket of technology will start to get you down the road of understanding your business as a whole. And so I think, and they don't focus on it because of that, right? They just kind of run from it and then put it back on, well, we're a human business, right? And jobs also. We don't want to not have a front desk agent because we want to be an employer. And that resonates well in the community. So, and Ken, to your point, it doesn't mean they're losing jobs. You're just doing it different, right? You're gonna put that experience elsewhere.
Yeah, and I would add on to that as
Ken, you're muted.
Oh,
I can hear.
I can hear.
Oh, maybe. It's
you can hear? Okay.
Yeah, I got you.
No, I mean, I just want to add on to it too, is that, we looked at, we have guys that work with us from Wall Street, right? So we looked at a few different probably data points here. And one of them that was so important to us in what we're doing is that the market cap. Airbnb's market cap is at $40 billion higher than the top 3 hotel brands combined. And when we see that and we're like, okay, what type of service does Airbnb give you when you get to the home, the apartment, or any of it? You don't even see the host. They're pretty much like, here you go. Here's the click and go technology and you're good to go, right? Now, how do we bring that into hotels? And what we've done with our hotel brand is there's no front desk there, right? So our agents are concierge. Now, usually when you need 60, 70 arrivals, you need 2-3 agents. We turn that down to 1 agent now. And then the whole entire way of automation, like we own the robots, we own the software, we own all the smart devices. Now, this is something that we're delivering the technology to the guests, because I don't think no longer, I'm not going to say I disagree with the human touch, but I don't think it's as important as it was before. Airbnb's obviously now made the guest aware that the human touch, and Snyder as well, both of those new age hospitality companies have made every guest aware now that you're going to get less and less human interaction, right? It's totally up to you what you want to do. We're going to leave things in the way you want to do it. Leave it on the way that it's your own terms. And that's kind of what I want to add. I think the industry's changing to new philosophy, and the guests are understanding that. And I think the technology portion plays a huge part, and the data portion as well.
I mean, that's interesting, because if you think of operations as like a network, right? And then at the end of that network, there's a node, right? And traditionally, it's like person at the end of that node. You go here, go there, do this, do that. Here's the report, etc. But more and more, the people are being replaced with an app, a cell phone, right? And I think we're in that tradition. And then I think, Ken, you'd be on the side of all, like, no people, all robots, right? Everything there. We're transitioning to that kind of space slowly. But the idea that at the end of that node is maybe, not an app or a robot or a person like A or B, but it's a technology enabled person, right? They have more context, more information to say, oh, when you go here or we do this, now I can look at it in a wider context that I did before.
I think what Ken's saying, I mean, you're kind of redefining human touch, right? Before it was literally interpreted. Now you're looking at it differently, right? Human touch means, am I at least accommodating all the needs you have? Doesn't necessarily physically mean somebody has to be there to do that, right? As long as it's accounting for the things that you have a need for, that's human touch, right? As well, right? It's just in a different way now. We're kind of looking at it completely different, and we've trained guests now to expect really crappy service to pay more for, just as a function of budgets and finances, back to LD, right? Mm-hmm. But I think the technology will bring back the human touch, maybe in a completely different way. And I think that's what, Ken's talking about, Brad, we're all sort of looking at what does that now mean moving forward, and what's it cost in order to do that or not, and what's the benefit, right?
Yeah,
more consistency of service sometimes, right? So when we think about what's really important kind of as operators for guest experience, especially in hospitality, it's also true in office or multifamily, we want a consistent experience, right? A brand is a promise. We're promising a certain experience, a certain feeling, a certain level, right? And then the question is, are people able to provide that experience better than automated processes? And I would guess it's probably not the case, right? I mean, I think of, like a valet in, London, society, 150 years ago, right? Putting somebody's jacket on, right? People didn't dress themselves, but it was completely obvious that you need to employ somebody to do that you need a human touch to put your jacket on if you're, high society, right? Whereas, today it's unheard of even for high society, and maybe the king still help I know. But I don't have anyone to help me put a jacket on, in case that was a question. And
There's a few princes and kings that still expect that, but
yeah, I mean, I think that we create a better experience, right? I'd prefer a coffee machine that provides a perfect cup of coffee every time than a person who does it, sometimes a little better. Sometimes I want to reduce the variability. And I think that in hospitality, we can reduce that variability. And I think that there are also places where we think we need humans to create an experience where I think the consumer would be better not to have that experience. I think of, for example, a doorman who welcomes you into a building. Is that really a necessary task, right? A greeter, essentially, because that person isn't security. That person isn't checking if you really are in the building or not. They're literally just there to give you a feeling that you're respected because we paid somebody to stand there while you walked into the building. And I wonder if that's good use of the experience, or maybe that same budget could have been used to give me something else. So give me a virtual hug as I walked in and had a sign that said, "Oh, hey, LB, your coffee's ready," or something like that. Maybe I'd feel a lot more personal or a lot more excited to walk in the building every day than having a person stand there, which we think of as really important for an experience, right? And I think it's because we don't measure these things. And if we measured, we'd find out that person's kind of useless. And a sign that said, "Hey, your subway's 3 minutes away. You want to head down now instead of in 10 minutes." I know it's stupid, but that will make a difference in my experience that day, right?
Yeah, we like the idea of using technology to augment the human piece. A little bit to what Ken's point was, instead of having to walk into a hotel and then you check in with a front desk staff, I guess our analog for that would be self-guided touring, letting people schedule tours on their own time and getting analytics from where they're spending most of their time in the space, which then allows us to A, reduce our staff, and B, hire differently. So now you have people who are sales and customer service ninjas that work for you, and you can spend a little bit more on that human capital so that when they're closing that sale, they know, hey, this particular prospect is interested in the fitness center and the pool. That's where they spent 80% of their self-guided tour. So now our entire pitch is going to be geared towards that. And they don't have to be a tour guide too. Somebody else can handle, or a piece of technology can handle that. And then they can put more of their efforts on improving the current resident experience as well. And we find that, I don't know what to call anybody who's 16 to 20 right now, Zoomers, Gen Z, whatever we've come up with. I'm working on the next generation title, but whatever that is, they don't necessarily want to have to stand there and awkwardly be shown around a room by somebody. They just want to do it, get in, get out, and see what they need to see. So if you can remove the human touch for those who don't want the human touch, then not everybody's a hugger. So that's why I'm not allowed to hug everyone as they walk in, and that's the same deal with any customer service.
Yeah, I think that the difference between the Airbnb analogy and I think what we do, and I think a lot of people here probably do, is Airbnb created a new market and circumvented the existing market. Whereas we're trying to not conform, but enhance and enable the existing owners and operators to better the existing market. So I think that's kind of the primary difference. And some of the stuff we talked about earlier too, about the challenges of kind of crossing this chasm and adopting technology and it being a little bit slow, play into exactly that, where nothing in the quote unquote prop tech market for the most part is set it and forget it. You buy it, we set it up, and the operators are able to execute that and you get value out of it. We've seen a lot of people waste a lot of money with the anticipation that they can set it and forget it, and that's just not the case. And so we think pretty strongly like there needs to be this human element and the service element. There's examples of even just basic communication. Like, can you enable the communication between a property manager and their tenant companies? we've had people be like, I don't know why people aren't using our tenant amenity lounge. We put in so much investment into it. We've got X, Y, and Z. Well, 80% of the tenants didn't know that the tenant amenity lounge was open to them. They didn't know it existed. They didn't know that they had thought they had to sign up. Like, there's so much discrepancy potentially there that if you can just use the technology, even in a very basic way, to enhance the communication and be able to get value out of these existing investments, I think that's a really key component.
That's interesting where you're kind of talking about this data-enabled touch, right? If using Chris's just like reinventing the human touch. I mean, we're kind of all cyborgs today, right? I don't have to remember a lot of things because I have a cell phone in my pocket. I'll look up exactly what LD was talking about in a second about kings and putting on coats. It's like I don't need to go talk to LD, right? I can look that up, and then when I see him in New York City, we're gonna have a conversation and dive deeper into that.
I thank God every day because I couldn't remember anything else.
I'm expecting an update. I want to hear if they're still using valves to put the brackets on.
Yeah, it's so with the like advent data and real estate adopting data, there's actually a lot of companies out there like HQO or Cherre that are really don't own any real estate assets, but they own all the data. I don't know if there's a feeling yet within real estate that perhaps non-traditional or real estate outsider companies pose a threat to the publicly traded REITs existing, right? If Amazon has Alexa and knows what you want and delivers all your packages to you and can deliver, insights to you, could Amazon, pose a threat to CA Ventures, right? In being a multifamily operator, right? Or a tenant. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Brad, of kind of outsider incumbents that are not real estate operators or owners or developers coming in because they have such a large set of data that gives them typically an unfair advantage where they would look at the real estate market and say no, but now because of this data accumulation, they may think about that.
That's a good question. Right. I don't see that a ton. We haven't seen, sure, the Alexa example, there's a lot of data there, that could be leveraged. With any of these major operators, we kind of try to, we take our resident privacy as far as we possibly can. I mean, you can get a lot of information without, are you speaking specifically to those who would be living in our buildings or just a general swath of data?
Just saying that companies that aren't seen as real estate companies now coming into that territory because they have data access of their own to enable that. Yeah,
it's fine in the sense that it can work if you don't want a great solution, but a lot of times something that comes in that is just hey, we see this a lot where a company used to do multifamily and they want to come into student, or used to do commercial and they want to come into student. It's a totally different animal. And so you find something where it's not a square peg round hole. It's like trying to fit an octagon into a circle. Like you can make it kind of squeeze in there, but you're going to kind of dent the circle and it's not what you really want. There's going to be gaps and there's going to be issues with it. And if the company's not willing to actually tailor a product to the use case, then it ends up being, it ends up that it's just not going to be as good, no matter how big or broad it is. Somebody's going to come in and say, well, okay, that's close, but let's just do this better. There's too much innovation out there and there's too many people willing to do that.
Brad, I want to agree with you and challenge you at the same time. I agree in the sense that we don't really see, I've not seen, I think we have a pretty good map of who owns what properties in the US. I have not seen major investment holdings by those technology plays. That being said, folks like Amazon, Google, Microsoft predominantly hold some of the largest real estate portfolios in the world by far. And it's not necessarily obvious when you look at those companies. They are, they're right up there with, and some of them eclipse the biggest property holders that you think of when you think of like Brookfield and Blackstone, right? And that means that they actually do understand real estate really well. And their ability to actually partner with some of these other firms to deploy a strategy and share unique information with those operating firms is actually really interesting in that we have actually seen in multiple ways. We've seen hedge funds do that, where hedge funds have access to a lot of data that otherwise would not be available, for credit data, certain trend data that is not obvious in the real estate world. It's being used for other types of high frequency trading operations. So very, really good quality data that's been tried and tested. And if I can find an advantage and I can go partner with an operating company, because I'd have no clue how to operate real estate. I'm never going to know. And the thought of me, as a hedge fund, or maybe a tech company can, if they're really, really big, might be able to hire a lot of people. But the thought of becoming operational excellence overnight is just unfathomable to me, right? But if I can partner and I can give access to that special data that only I have access to an operator that I think really highly of, and we can share some of that profit together, that we do see. And you can see that with some of the big hedge funds, and some of them have made public their announcements in the space, some haven't. There's a reason the biggest hedge funds in the world are in the real estate space for the first time in my memory, and turning 40. So at least 25 years of me and my, since I've been starting companies, I've never seen this happen before. And I think it's indicative of what's to come. There's a lot of unique access to data that they can't act on it necessarily directly because they don't have the operational expertise, but by partnering, we can do that. You see that with SFR right now as well, right? You see the amount of partnerships in the single family rental space with big firms that have access to capital, that are ordinarily experts in real estate, but just have no idea how to do anything with that asset class, are partnering with people in that space to go all over it because they think it's really valuable. So I think we'll see more of that.
Yeah, I think that.
Oh no, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think the data itself that they have is valuable, and I think that it is certainly malleable to the use case. I was speaking more from the operational, like what are they doing in that space and how it's going to fit. Typically, that's where we see the issues. But 100%, like if you can leverage it, by all means, it's a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, I just wanted to add what LD was just saying about the hedge funds and getting into real estate. I mean, I don't know if you guys knew, Amazon has put in millions and millions of dollars into Snyder. We've had conversations with Blackstone, Goldman, on our hotel brand. They're really at the point where they want to get into this industry of hospitality with the real estate portion, right? And it's because in 2020, 84% of the hotels were operated by brands. There's 278 brands in this country. And when we talk about the top three, that's only maybe you can come up with about 80 to 90 brands right there, right? So there's a lot more brands here. Like you've got Journey, you've got Russell Hotels, you've got all these different brands. And now, Blackstone just acquired, it's been maybe a month, the Extended Stay America. They owned the G6 before, and they are just wanting to get in, but the other hedge funds are now wanting to get in. We've had so much conversation that I was just surprised by it, that how much they want in now. And I didn't see this 2 years ago. I absolutely didn't see this 2 years ago, because at that 2 years ago, we were talking with a good friend of mine that I graduated. Her father's on the private investment fund in Saudi Arabia. And, I was talking to him 2 years ago and they weren't interested, but then obviously they made a splash with Lucid. And, I think a lot of these things that are happening now are because of the pandemic and what they're seeing, the values of it and the value add, right? Real estate is just through the market. And I'm not even talking on a commercial aspect. I think, Kurt, I spoke to you about this on the residential portion, right? I live in Alpharetta, Georgia. A house goes for sale here tomorrow. It's gone next week with over 60 offers, and it's just a whole way of how things are changing, even with the data portion. I think what I'm also hearing, how people are now building hotels, it's very different building hotels. We were before talking 18 to 24 months. Now we're talking 12 to 14 months. We're talking 3D dimensions. We're talking all this other stuff. And there's different data points that are coming into this.
Yeah, I think, and if I could just, Kurt,
yeah, please.
At least in the hospitality, right? We transitioned out of real estate into branding, right? Marriott, none of the brands own real estate anymore. too expensive, right? They couldn't fund it and pay for it, and because of the upturns and downturns. So then they became brand companies, and we had, Ken, to your point, lots and lots, thousands of owners, individuals who wanted to own a hotel, and now we see hedge funds, LD, and larger investment companies saying, "Oh, now we can buy large amounts of asset." And also have some say over how they actually run by virtue of some influence over the brands. And I think that might help also bring the technology to the forefront, right? Because when you're trying to convince 10,000 owners to change something one-off, impossible, right? When you have a larger company who's got significant investment in a larger swath of real estate, that also will benefit them much easier, as long as it makes sense on their bottom line. And that's the whole, I think, LD, that's the whole sort of end of the day. Where's the value add? Does it make sense ultimately? And I think that's where we'll start to see the transition occur, from my point of view.
Yeah, I mean, traditionally, real estate is a fragmented industry with many owners, many moms and pops. And as Microsoft or Google buy up swaths, right, they gain that control and put in their basically operational input into that, or they can, right? And I know, Brad, you guys are taking a very forward approach on all these things. And LD, you're mentioning, it's like, hey, I'm not a operator, right? I never do operational excellence, but acquiring properties, right? Getting in there, seeing value where other people don't, puts traditional guys out, right? They can't bid. Like if I was going to go bid for a hotel against the trigger, I would lose every time because he sees things I don't, right? But technology and that data insight can begin to change that, so that people lose out on that acquire. And then, pushing it farther to like Ken, where, there's no one in the building, right? The operational excellence, the endpoint is it's a robot or it's an app, right? So we're, I think, moving towards that. But again, right now it's this kind of, we're all cyborgs. I'm getting data, I'm making more intelligent decisions to change what Chris was talking about, like what it means of the physical touch that people bring to this space.
Yeah, I think the last thing I would add about the outsiders, we definitely see, I mean, even yesterday, like the biggest office purchase since the beginning of the pandemic was Google yesterday for $2.1 billion, a huge asset in downtown Manhattan. So there's that side of it. But then I think where you're going to see this go, if you subscribe to the idea of the physical world as a computing platform, is, Microsoft was earlier in this, but every major technology company now has some version of the digital twin that they advertise and promote and are trying to figure out, frankly. I think it could be as simple as part of the cloud wars. Hey, we want all this. There's so much data coming off of physical space, off of commercial real estate. We want to be the primary host and owner. And so it could be as simple as that, just from a cloud storage perspective. But then how does it manifest itself in terms of like actionable elements of the rest of these businesses? So I think, we've seen it already early on, but like the FANG companies, the big tech firms are going to be major players from a data perspective, not just from an asset ownership perspective, which they're already playing in as LD outline.
Yeah, that's really kind of interesting to think about. It's also scary. It's a bit scary as well.
Kurt, I just want to add, I know you were saying that we don't want to have any employees. I think we definitely want to have employees, but it needs to be cut down 50%. People ask me this question. It's like, you're taking jobs, and I always respond with an answer. I'm like, what jobs? I'm like, nobody wants to work in hospitality. It's down 600,000 jobs in the labor industry. The labor component is not going to recover till 2025. So we don't have jobs to even provide, So, I mean, we have jobs to provide. We just don't have employees. And, I think this is where automation, where we feel if a hotel needs 30 employees, now it's only going to need 12. So that's kind of where we are with that.
Yeah, I think that is true. And that's another part where people that were working in the hospitality made a shift, right? Where they would go drive for Uber or work for Amazon now, and they get paid more and don't have to work as long. That was something kind of we didn't expect out of the pandemic. But yeah, the labor, we've been talking a lot about data about the end customer, the guest, the tenant, but also, on the workers, the staff in the buildings, right? Understand how can we improve their experience so they do want to stay, right? Because turnover of people is huge expense, and it's a huge pain in the butt, and you lose someone good that makes all the difference for that really high touch point, right? Tenants are gonna, complain, or the guests are not gonna have that same experience too. So,
and I want to add is now we have a lot of tech companies making huge investments. Microsoft did it with the oil hotels. Bill Gates just recently bought almost 30% of the Ritz-Carlton. Apple built their first hotel on their campus in Texas. Google just eliminated the Google ads for hotel because Expedia was buying all of it, and they made it more expensive. So Expedia couldn't buy it. So they lost almost 30% of revenue in the first 9 months of this year because of that. So when we speak with Google, they're like, yes, we're interested in a hotel model. A, B, C, D, this is what they want. And I will tell you, in the next 6 to 8 months, we will see a Google hotel. There will be a Google hotel. Some way, somehow, it's going to happen because they are going to want to penetrate that market. And that's what we're seeing, a lot of tech companies getting involved. And the data has a huge play into the industry because the data has always been around. Data has been around in hospitality 40, 50 years ago. When we talk about all the formulas, all the data that we have in the industry, it's like it goes on and on and on,
Yeah. Well, we're about up on time here. This has been a great conversation. Everyone's perspective here, talking about everything from kind of data analysis to silo data to touch points. It's been fantastic, and I think everyone watching's got a lot out of this. And I'd just like to thank everyone on the panel. You guys are star-studded panel, fantastic geniuses here, and I really appreciate you guys' time here, and I hope you guys had fun here as well.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks,
Brad.
Thanks, Kurt.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks all.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.